Good morning and welcome to the center. This morning we're going to meditate and we have a special guest, Venerable Sanata Vihari. I think most of our members knew him very well. We call Mexican American Buddhist monk. So time to time he come into our temple. Before we start the service, I just want to mention few things. One of the monks used to come to the IBMC and giving the retreat and Dhamma talk also. Venerable Thik Anjao, Desert Sin Center, abbot of the Desert Sin Center. He passed away a few days ago. I remember 1991, 92, around that time, he used to come to our temple and giving Dhamma talk and sometime doing some retreat also. I think last time I met him before the COVID, I think 2 years ago I met in Vietnamese temple also. However, he passed away. Thinking about him to good rebirth. You can do the meditation also. And I just want to say thanks again. I was 2 weeks away from the IBMC. And when I'm away, all the monks and our people just take care of the temple. So thank you so much for everybody. That's it. And Venerable Sanata Vihari, you can start your meditation first. Almost 10 minutes you can do the meditation. After that, you can do your Dhamma talk. And you mostly welcome, and I hope you will come maybe next month.
We'll see, Bhante, yes.
Okay. Next month, one more time. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so let's get ready to just do a short meditation. So just get comfortable, whatever works for you. You don't have to do anything fancy. Just get comfortable, but I will ask that you keep your back straight. That's important. No one has a perfectly straight back, and we all have different bodies. But to the extent that you can keep your back straight, that's good. And then also, if you like, I would like to invite you to close your eyes. And if you don't close your eyes, you can just leave them open and just kind of gaze downwards about like 2 or 3 feet right in front of you. But if you decide to keep your eyes open, just focus right in front of you, below you, without moving your eyes. So we can start by withdrawing our attention from the external environment, right? So we begin to redirect our attention inside instead of letting our attention go outside. And we do this by using the breath. We use the breath as our pillar, as our anchor to the body. So slowly, gently, begin to focus and pay attention to your breath. And just observe it. You don't need to try to do anything. Just breathe in a normal way. And just observe your breath. Pay attention to the breath. Feel the breath. Feel the breathing in. Feel the breathing out. Feel the breathing in and feel the breathing out. You might notice that your mind begins to wander. No worries. If your mind wanders, make a mental note. Mind is wandering, and gently bring your attention back to the breath. Feeling the breath. Feeling the inhalations and feeling the exhalations. And as we do this, we can begin to notice the differences in the breath. Perhaps there is a long breath. Perhaps there is a short breath. Perhaps you're breathing fast or breathing slow. And just be mindful, pay attention to the way in which you're breathing. Don't try to change it in any way. Don't try to control it. Feel your breath and be aware of the differences in the breath. If your mind wanders, no worries, gently bring it back to the breath. Feeling any differences in the breath. And we continue by expanding our attention to become aware of the entire breath. So we try to encompass the entire breathing process from the moment the air enters our nose and we fill up our lungs, expand our lungs, and our lungs contract and the air comes out of our lungs and out of our nose. So we try to become mindful of this entire process, mindful of the entire breath from beginning to end, feeling the breath throughout your entire body. Feeling the breathing in and feeling the breathing out. Feeling the entire inhalation throughout the body and feeling the entire exhalation throughout the body. You might notice your chest expanding and your abdomen expanding. You might notice how your entire torso expands every time you breathe in, and how it deflates and constricts itself when you breathe out. If the mind wanders, no worries, gently bring your attention back to the breath. Mind wanders, we bring it back. Mind wanders, we bring it back. That's the training. That's the practice. And now as we breathe in, we can become aware of our entire body, from head to toe, front and back, and all around. So breathing in, becoming mindful of the entire body, and breathing out, becoming mindful of the entire body. Breathing in, feeling the entire body, and breathing out, feeling the entire body. We don't have to try to do anything. We are just observing, increasing our awareness of the body, feeling the body as we breathe in, and feeling the body as we breathe out. And as we become aware of the entire body, we try to find stillness in the body. We try to find tranquility of body. So for the next few minutes that we have in this meditation, try not to react to any bodily sensations. Don't move around, don't adjust, don't scratch yourself, don't move your tongue in your mouth, don't look around. Just find stillness, find calmness in your body. Be imperturbable, unshaken for the next 2 minutes. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Venerable Sanata Vihari, leading the meditation. So Venerable Sanat Vihari is a very busy monk. I think last time he went to the Vietnam, Thailand, and some other countries, back in East Coast, everywhere going, traveling a lot of, in Europe. Of course, he went to Sri Lanka a few times, and he's very popular amongst around Southern California. So we always happy to see Venerable, and we really appreciate about your help for the Buddhism. So you can start your Dhamma talk right now.
Thank you, Bhante. So first and foremost, I'm paying my respects to our Chief Bhante and to all the venerables here today. And with their permission, I would like now to share a few words of Dhamma with all of you. And also, before I share my words of Dhamma, I'd like to pay my respects to our Lord Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Bhante is very right, I'm so busy. I wish I wasn't a busy monk. When I first became a monk, I wanted to be an aranya monk, a forest monk, a wilderness monk. But then I remember our Bodhihandru, Bhante Srinivasa, he says, that's very good that you want to do that. But you're a very unique person. And if you stay here in the city, you can help a lot of people. Just think about that. So if you want to go, you can go. We can arrange a place for you in Sri Lanka to practice in the forest. But I think you will be a lot of service here. But I wanted to go to the forest and meditate, right? But then as I kept writing the suttas, I kept seeing how the Buddha teaches for the benefit of the many, right? And how he sends the monks. Monks, don't two of you go in the same place, spread out and teach for the benefit of the many. And we talk about the Brahma Viharas, the divine dwellings, about Metta, Karuna, Mudita, and Upekkha. We talk about selflessness and all these beautiful things. And here I was just thinking about me, right? What's good for me? I want to be free from samsara. I don't want pain. I want happiness. I want enlightenment. Just atta, right? I all over again. So I was going from a worldly clinging of self, right? Like, I want to go to the movies, I want to go on vacation, to a spiritual clinging, right? Like, I want all these things for myself now. And I was like, well, that's kind of ridiculous, you know? I'm just changing costumes. I'm not really changing the person wearing the costume. And then when I was teaching the little kids in Dhamma school, I started seeing like the power of teaching and helping others. And I said, oh, wow, this is so beautiful. And people are so grateful when you're able to help them and transform their lives. And from then till now, I've been able to see kids in elementary school now go to university. In the last 9 years that I've been at the temple, I've seen kids that started going to university and now they're married with their own kids in the last 9 years. And I'm like, this is amazing, like those transformations. And they'll tell me things that I gave on a Dhamma talk or I shared in a interview or in Dhamma school that I don't even remember. And they still remember and they find it very important. So it's just, I find it very amazing or remarkable and miraculous how we have certain ideas about what Dhamma practice is, right? And it could be something completely different. We can end up doing something completely different. Or we have such a narrow view of what it means to practice Dhamma, to learn the Dhamma. But the Dhamma is vast, right? there's thousands in the Mahayana tradition. They talk about thousands and thousands of Dharma gates, right? Of different ways to come into the Dhamma and practice it. And that's been my experience. I think that's the most powerful thing that I can take away from all my Dhamma practice, is just how vast it is. Before, I thought it was just be in the forest and meditate on your own. And then I got into like academic Buddhism, doing all this research and going into the early suttas and learning Pali, and just really focusing on the intellectual part. Then I thought, oh no, this is the most important part. And then I got into helping others, doing acts of service and teaching. And I thought, well, this is the most important part. And then I saw a pattern here, right? Like it's just whatever I'm into in that moment, I think is the most important thing, right? Whatever I like is the most important thing. But that's a beautiful insight to have, right? Because it stops you from clinging too hard to anything, from grasping too hard. Once you see that whatever we think important, whatever we think is the most important thing is just the flavor of the week, right? That's this week's special. It's not ultimately the highest teaching. And I think sometimes we don't see that. And that's to our own detriment, because our practice becomes very limiting and narrow. And then also at times it leads to conceit, right? Like, well, I'm the real monk, I'm the real Buddhist, and those people over there are not the real ones, right? They're doing something else. They're doing cultural stuff, or they're doing magic, or they're just intellectual Buddhists. They don't really practice. They just memorize the suttas, but they don't really practice. Or they meditate, but they meditate the wrong way. Like all this kind of, you get stuck. You don't realize, like, oh, I'm just stuck in whatever I like, whatever feeds my own inclination of mind. So we all have like these tendencies, right? And we get caught up on our tendencies. We get caught up in whatever mental patterns we've been carrying for thousands and thousands of lives, right? And we just keep trying to feed that over and over and over again. And when we practice Dhamma, we do the same thing. But we feel like we can justify it better because it's Dhamma, right? Because it's Dhamma practice, then it's okay to kind of be this way. So I think this is one of the things that I found very powerful, to not cling to anything, to not take a narrow view on anything, to not overemphasize any particular part to the detriment of another part. And then that has led me to be able to experiment and be curious with the Dhamma in different ways, and to take the Dhamma outside the temple, right? And to take the Dhamma outside of the meditation retreat, and even to take the Dhamma outside of the Buddhist community and share with people who probably don't even care about Buddhism or anything or religion at all, right? Or sometimes maybe they don't even care about their own well-being. The last year and a half I've been traveling a lot with my teacher's permission. And one of the places that I went to while I was traveling was Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I didn't have a place to stay, so I went on Facebook and I messaged a Thai temple. And the Ajahn, the abbot there, said, yes, please, you can come and stay. So I was so happy to have a place to stay. And I stayed with him. But his temple is in the very rough part of Albuquerque. It's kind of like where our Skid Row. It's like that. And I'm used to always walking around. And the next morning I was like, Ajahn, I'm going to go for a walk. He's like, maybe not, And I said, no, I always go, I'll be okay. He's like, are you sure? I was like, yeah. And the other monks are like, oh, be careful. There's a lot of homeless people and stuff like that. People have tried to break into the temple before. And I was like, okay, no worries. So one of these times I was just walking. I saw that there was like a veterans hospital. So I just set that as my point. I'm going to walk all the way to the veterans hospital, come back. It'll take like about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours to walk there and come back. So I was walking there, and while I was walking there, I saw this man. I don't know why he called my attention. Maybe because there wasn't that many people walking. Everyone's driving over there because it's like the desert. It's like way too hot. And it's kind of set up like LA where there's not good public transportation. So like nobody wants to walk. Everyone has to use their car. And I was looking at him, and then he walks into the road, but in a very erratic way. And I'm thinking, oh no, this is not safe. This is not good. And then I see a car come really close to him and almost hit him. And even I go like this, like it was too much. And then he stays there and other cars are coming too, and like he's in a very dangerous situation. But I'm far away, so I can't even shout. But I'm thinking as I get closer, I'm going to tell him, please, come over here. I want to talk to you. I'll find some excuse to get him out of the road. But luckily enough, by the time I got close enough, some car honked really loud at him, and he went to the other side of the road. And he kind of disappeared, and I didn't see him anymore. So then after a couple of blocks, I could smell a Mexican bakery. So there's like this thing called pan dulce. And like Mexican bakeries, they make all this good stuff. I could smell it while I'm getting near it. And I was like, oh, it smells so good over here. It'd be nice to have one of these. Guess who's coming out of that Mexican bakery? That same man. And now he was very close. I could see him. And he's what we would call a homie. You know what a homie is? Like a cholo, like a Mexican gangbanger? I could tell now because he's really close. And he has that homie look, like, he's looking all hard. But he has a bag full of pan dulce, so he doesn't look that hard. He doesn't look that intimidating. When you have a bunch of desserts in your hand, you don't look that scary. So he's coming out with the whole bag, and he's walking towards me and just looking at me, almost like if he was dogging me, just staring at me, walking towards me, He comes right up to me, and he goes, would you like some bread? And I was like, in my head, I was just thinking about that. It would be nice to have some. And it was early in the morning, so it was allowable. So then he offered me the bread. And then he said like, oh, what are you? And I said, oh, I'm a Buddhist monk. Oh, he's like, oh, yeah, man. He just started like, he had something going on. I don't know if he was on drugs or if he had some mental health issues. His words were like, he was using the words properly, but it didn't make sense, like the way he was speaking or what he was talking about. And I was just, being like, yes, okay, that's nice. And it only lasted like 2 minutes. And then he tells me, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I wanted to break bread with you. Maybe he knows a few verses from the Bible or something like that. And it was such a beautiful experience. Then he just took off, and I never saw him again. And I find these like small interactions to be, to me, some of the more powerful examples of Dhamma practice. Like, what do we do when we're confronted with someone maybe about to get hurt? Like what comes to your mind? How do you deal with someone that's in danger? How do you deal with someone who you usually associate as a dangerous person? How do you deal with that, right? Or how do you deal with someone that's not there, right? Usually hear people, they're scared of people with like mental health issues or who are on drugs. They see the person's not behaving normally and they see him as dangerous, right? Or how do you deal with like weird things like someone just offering you bread? I think many people would be suspicious about eating anything that someone just gives you, out of nowhere. So how do you bring the Dhamma practice to help you with all these challenging or different situations? I feel like there's really where we see how much we've cultivated in the practice. It's very easy to be a Buddhist on the cushion or while you're reading a sutta or in a temple where everyone's like on the same page. But can you do that outside when people don't reciprocate, right? Or where people are maybe even hostile to you? Sometimes people see me and they scream nasty things, or that I need saving, that I'm going to go to hell, and all these kinds of things. Like, how do you interact with people when they're actually wishing you harm, and not just like a little harm? They want you to suffer forever, right? For the rest of eternity. What does your mind do at that point, right? There you get to see, if all that reading, all that sitting has brought any fruits. I'm not saying that you should put yourself in those situations. Don't do that. But what happens when you find yourself there? Right? There's the times that we should practice another type of meditation that the Buddha told us, which is not emphasized that much in the West, which is called anusati. Most of us know about sati, right? Mindfulness. But we don't know about anusati. Unless you grew up Buddhist, then you know anusati. Anu means like to bring back, to recollect again. And sati is here to attention or mindfulness, right? So bring to mind, to bring to mind. So when we find ourselves in these difficult situations, we need to bring to mind the Dhamma, right? Bring to mind the Buddha. What would Buddha do? Just like what would Jesus do, right? You bring to mind the Dhamma. You know, how do I navigate this situation from the perspective of the Dhamma, right? You bring to mind the Sangha. Maybe you see you don't have these qualities, but maybe you can pull on the qualities of the Sangha. Think about your teacher, like, oh, how would my teacher, right? Or how would my Dhamma friend react in this situation or respond to this situation, right? You can recollect metta, loving kindness. You can recollect compassion, karuna, right? So there's so many of these practices that we can use. We can recollect our own mortality, right? That death is imminent. Like, what would I do if this was my last day? You know, would I argue with everyone and be like petty about things? Probably not, you know? It wouldn't matter in the grand scheme of things that if I only had one day to live or one breath, right? If this was my last breath and someone's a jerk to me, would I want to die like with animosity towards this person? Probably not. That's not a good way to go, right? So I think this is another beautiful practice that the Buddha offers us, a more contemplative practice about bringing to mind. It's not only about emptying the mind and being peaceful, but also about putting wholesome things in the mind, right? When it's useful. That's why I like about the word kusala, which means wholesome or good, but also means skillful, right? So when we find ourselves in difficult situations, we can take out the proper tool in our Buddhist tool belt and apply it in that situation and see if it works for us or not, and see where our shortcomings are, what we're doing really good in. It's kind of like a way to do a little inventory about our practice. So then I'll share with you one more story. That wasn't the last thing that happened to me when I was in Albuquerque. So then a few days later, maybe 2 days later, again, I went for a walk, and I went a little bit further. This time I walked towards where all the NGOs and all the other kind of like services that are being provided to the homeless people in the area are, and the encampments are. So I went just that way because I wanted to walk in a different direction. And on my way back, again, I saw two homies and two homegirls, and they were just chilling in front of a liquor store. And I'm walking by, and they're like, "Hey, what's up?" And I'm like, "Hello." One of them doesn't have a shirt, and he's all tatted up, everything. You can see all the gang tattoos. The other guy is just wearing like white t-shirt and jeans. And then the two homegirls, I forget exactly what they were wearing. And then I looked at their hands, and a couple of them had like some beers in their hands, and they're like, "Hey, can we talk to you?" And I was like, "Oh, this is not a good look." But then I was like, why not? You know, like, who else is going to talk to them? Like, when are they going to get a chance to talk to a monk? Maybe it's not right for a monk to be standing with people drinking alcohol. You know, maybe it's an offense, but they're only going to get this chance once, right? And then I can always confess the offense and make up for it. But these people, they won't get this chance maybe again. So I stood there with them, you know, and I talked to them. And they shared some personal stuff with me. And then the gangster without the shirt, he just started crying right there, like in the middle of the street. And then his friend, the other homie, started hugging him. And then they're like, "Oh, thank you so much for listening to us." And then the guy without the shirt's like, "Can I give you a hug?" But he was already coming in. So I was just like, I went like this, and he just came in and he hugged me. He's like, "Thank you so much," you know, and he had tears coming down, you know, out of his eyes. And maybe from a certain perspective, I should have said no, right? Like, no, these are my rules, like no hugs. But the compassionate response was to be like, okay, right? Like, he made himself so vulnerable, right? Especially for these tough guys, it's hard for them to be vulnerable. Maybe because he was drinking, it made it a little bit easier for him to be vulnerable, right? And he was with his friends, so he had the support. And then that shows how he has confidence in the monks, right? He has a certain perspective about monks, like, oh, monks are good people, I can trust them, I can share with them, even though he's probably never met a Buddhist monk. So I don't want to destroy that image for him by going like this. Then he's going to, oh, monks are just like everyone else. They're going to reject me. Society rejects me, right? I'm not good because not even the monks will accept me, right? So I just like, okay. And then I went back to the temple. And I've had interactions like that here too. In LA, it's very obvious, you know, because like here's like where all the homies started, right? Like the kind of gang cholo culture started. But in other places like that, it's something new, you know. And I wouldn't I didn't go there prepared. I didn't go there with that mentality, ready to see that. When I walk out the temple here, I know like that's a possibility. But over there, I didn't have that in mind. You know, I'm just traveling throughout the United States and kind of thinking most people won't even know who I am or won't want to talk to me. And then I had these basically modern day outcasts, right? That's what they are, modern day outcasts by society, be the ones who engage me. While I was there, no one else would engage me. There's some other like homeless people that were there. They talk to me, hey, how's it going? You're a Buddhist monk. But like the people who you would think are like the regular people in society, they never talk to me in Albuquerque. Like not one person. It was the vulnerable people who were the ones who talked to me, right? So there's another insight, right, about who are the people that we think are more closed, right? Who are the people that we think are more dangerous? Who are the people that we think are normal, right? Is it normal to be closed? Is it normal to look at people and think of them as other? Was it more normal to engage with people and try to have a conversation with them? In that sense, I think the gang members and the homeless people and the people on drugs, they were more normal because they were more open. They actually treat you like a human being, right? They see me that I'm different. They see themselves as different. Oh, we're the same sort of, huh? Because we're both different. But the normal people see me as strange, you know? So we're not going to talk to him. So these are things it's not easy to learn if you just stay in the temple. These are not easy things if you just stay in the university and learn, like academic Buddhism. These are things you only learn on the streets, on the roads, on the highways. And I think that's why the Buddha gave such emphasis on monks walking and traveling all the time, right? So one of my things is, one of my things that I've been trying to do and promote here in LA is to get monks to go walking outside. You know, because we're always in our cars everywhere we go, you know? And some of us has very nice cars. At our temple, we have like a Tesla SUV. It's very comfortable. It's nice. I enjoy it, especially on a hot day. But I'm never going to have these interactions if I stay in the Tesla, right? That's not going to happen. This only happens if we put ourselves out there. So, I mean, those are just a few stories that I wanted to share with you about how my views of practice have changed, what real Buddhism means, right? The different ways that we can practice, every way. If you just chant in the morning and offer candles to the Buddha, that is 100% valid, right? If you just meditate, that's 100% valid. If you just do academic Buddhism, that's also 100% valid. Like everything is valid, but just don't think that this is the only way, right? Or this is the right way and the other ones are not right, right? So that was like one of the things that came to my mind. If you do anything with a mind of saddha, with real faith and conviction and trust in the Dhamma, Buddha, and Sangha, anything can become a true practice. It's not about the outside, right? It's not about sila, bata, paramasa, rites and rituals, but it's about the cetana, the intention, your state of mind behind whatever you're doing. You can turn anything into a Dhamma practice, and I'll finish with this, how the Buddha said in the Satipatthana Sutta. While eating, chewing, extending your robes, while urinating and defecating, one should practice sati, mindfulness, right? So even when we're peeing and pooping, you can make that into a practice. Anything can be the practice, but it's about your state of mind. So that's very liberating to me, right? Now we can turn anything we want into our practice, and no one's right or wrong as long as the intention is the wholesome intention and in line with Dhamma. And now I would like to move on to my next part, which is my favorite part, which is the Q&A. I love the Dhamma discussion. I usually say I don't do Dhamma talks. I do Dhamma discussion. You know, both ways instead of preaching. I like to hear what you have to say, and I want to learn from you and listen. And maybe you can share your experiences. So Bhante, maybe we can do the Q&A now, and if we have a microphone that we can pass around. Who's going to be the first brave non-soul to ask?
This is a lot of responsibility with this mic here. First of all, thank you very much. I think the way that you share your experience is really amazing. Thank you. And I think it's probably pretty clear that you have a big impact on those people in Albuquerque. And I don't think they'll ever forget you.
Thank you.
But I had an experience this week that was pretty incredible, and it showed me some of the fruits of practice. I sat down with a Buddhist practitioner, layperson, and this particular man was walking through Venice in 2018, and somebody tried to murder him. Actually was stabbed in the brain, throat, liver. He survived. And I had never met him before, but he'd been practicing his whole life, and he did not have bitterness towards the person who did this to him. Not at all. And quite the opposite. He had complete compassion for his attacker. And I think it's neat to hear about the Dhamma and have things to shoot for and have things to work towards. And sitting down with this young man, I think I would have been bitter if somebody had stabbed me. He was not. And hearing all of these things, all of these stories, they're very useful. Thank you. Yeah, so I think the Dhamma is all around us, and I think that everything happens to teach us. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the kind words. I think the gentleman in the back wanted to ask a question.
You were talking about, being in the woods, meditating there is valid practice, walking around the streets of Albuquerque is valid practice. And I was wondering what in your mind would not be valid practice.
So anytime we cultivate like greed or hatred or violence or resentment or jealousy, or we do things that we know for sure lead to the detriment and suffering of other beings, then that's not a valid practice. So sometimes I have well-intentioned people who want to practice in a certain way at home. Maybe they want to follow 8 precepts. Maybe they want to meditate a lot, but they don't take into consideration that they're not living by themselves. They live with their family members. They live with parents and wife and children or roommates, and their practice, that deep of a practice, may not be received well by their family members, right? So I tell them, you have to think about the dynamics of the situation that you're in. You don't live alone. If you live alone, that's one thing, but you don't. So you have a good intention, but actually if you practice that way, it's not going to be a completely good practice. Because imagine if you have kids and you don't watch TV with them, you don't listen to music, you don't take them to the movies, you don't do like the stuff that kids want to do, right? And these kind of things, or you're like, oh, I only want to eat this kind of food, but everyone else in your family is eating a different kind of food. Like, it makes things too difficult. So your practice becomes very selfish. And once we do that, then the practice is not, because you're starting to fall into the greed, into the lobha, right? For me, like I was doing in the beginning, I want to do this, I want to do that. For me, myself, and I. But I just find a better way to justify it, because now it's Buddhism, it's spiritual, so it's okay to be selfish in a spiritual way, right?
It sounded like you really hit the practice right with dealing with the guy with no shirt and all the tattoos. But I was wondering, what was it that he was crying about? What was the key that hit that trigger?
So he was doing most of the talking, and both of the women didn't do much talking besides saying hello, and his friend did a little bit of the talking, but he was just talking about like all the challenges in his life, especially in his youth, and about how difficult it is, how it was. And I don't do anything, like I was just paying 100% attention to him, and just
somebody to listen to it.
Yeah, and someone not to tell him I didn't give him any advice, Sometimes the best thing we can do is not give advice. Because there's plenty of advice to go around, and even when you get it, we don't listen to it. So sometimes it's just a connection and someone not to judge you, right? Where you feel safe, someone you can actually tell all these things that maybe you don't feel so good about yourself, and you don't feel like that person's gonna say like, oh, you're a bad person, or you stop doing that. I didn't tell him to stop doing anything, right? I was there. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Oh, yes.
Thank you very much, Andre. I would say thank you for
Closer.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you for talk, very practical talk. And I
Hmm.
life. So thank you for the talk today, for the way you think about monks as more walking
Mhm.
on the street to interview with people around. It's hardly to see the people walking on the street right now.
Yeah.
And this, I'm going to share about this in my practice. But I want to ask you the question. I know that you were in Vietnam some time ago. So in Vietnam, especially, I don't know if you know what north and south, right? So I live in the south, and I know we both have the two traditions,
Mhm.
both Mahayana and Theravada. So what do you think the people both the tradition practice
Mm.
when you were there? How do you think?
Yeah, I think for the average person, they don't know the difference between Mahayana or Theravada. They showed me the same respect if I was a Mahayana monk, whether or not, when I went to Mahayana temples, they treated me the same. So I don't really see like any difference. Most people are like very like innocent about their practice. So when you're just walking around, like there's no difference. It doesn't really matter whether you're Theravada or Mahayana. And even in most temples, it doesn't matter. But just certain things that you do, right? So like if I were to eat meat, people would feel a little weird, because of the no eating meat in the Mahayana tradition in Vietnam, the way they practice it. And then the not taking any money, right? They're used to giving money to the monks all the time, and then you say no, they kind of, so it's like those little things, but they kind of just ask, they're curious, and they're like, okay, like whatever. So I don't really think like there's any division. And I saw the big ceremonies. I went to a few big ceremonies. There was both Mahayana monks and Theravada monks together at the same time. And a lot of Vajrayana now popular. A lot of Tibetan, Nepali, and Tibetans that live in India. A lot of those Rinpoches and Lamas are going to Vietnam and teaching. So it's actually very remarkable. You get like all three vehicles in Vietnam. And for the normal person, they're like, oh, it's just Buddhism, There isn't like here, maybe here there's like, oh, I'm Protestant and you're like Catholic and that's Orthodox. Like we don't play together. But over there, it's not like that, And no one ever asked me about like, why are you Theravada and I'm Mahayana? So I just think that it's not an issue to most people, That's something that happens in like what do you kind of like highbrow kind of groups, right? Like when people are a little, oh, I'm Theravada and I'm Mahayana. Like, it doesn't happen with the normal people, with the normal monks, because they're focused more on practice. People who are focused on practice are not focused on those things. But people who are focused on like academic studies, maybe they'll be interested, or people who are maybe, how can I say it, like, still have to work a lot with their own kind of like conceit. Somehow they have to kind of figure that out. But everywhere I stayed in Mahayana temples, I stayed in Theravada temples, and I stayed in this one unique Mahayana temple that they live just like their Theravada. Everything, the robes, everything, the practice, very strict Vinaya. But they also have like Avalokiteshvara, they have all the Mahayana sutras, but on practice level, they're identical to Theravada monks. And then Vietnam now has its own Theravada tradition too. They restarted a Vietnamese Theravada tradition. So it's just like, it's so beautiful and it's so varied. There's just so much going on in Vietnam.
Thank you, Bante, for
Mhm.
sharing your experience.
Yes.
Thank you, Bante, for your talk. It really resonated with me, not clinging to your views or thinking that this is the right way or having such a narrow practice of the Dhamma. My question is, can you describe a situation where perhaps you did have to correct someone's view or interpretation of the Dhamma? And so, for example, I've had the experience where I've met some folks who, practice whatever Buddhism, and like the whole emphasis is on, oh, have a better rebirth, have better, whatever, a chance for a car or something like that. Right? And like in my view, my understanding has always been, well, the whole point is when you're suffering, right? Like then craving and not come back. That's the whole point. If you keep coming back, then again, my understanding is the point is not to come back anymore. So, and if you're not trying to end craving, then you still separate. So, so from my perspective, it is the both, right? So, how would you handle a situation? Maybe not this question in particular, but if you had encounters where clearly perhaps the person you were talking to was just off or misinterpreting the Dhamma.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some examples where I've had to kind of like redirect people onto the... It mostly has to do, in my experience, with selfish practices. Like, and that happens more within the Western context, or people who are better off in Asia to have this kind of thing, where Buddhism becomes like self-care, right? Like Buddhism as self-care. And to some degree, they're misunderstanding the teachings more than the rebirth person. At least that person is setting up the conditions for a future life where they maybe can be free and, avoid going to hell and things like that. But this other person is just kind of like, it's kind of like taking a salt bath, like Buddhism to me is just a way to like relax, and I'm not really thinking about the future, or thinking about society or thinking about liberation. Buddhism to me is just self-care, right? Like if I were to go to the spa, or if I were to go to like Hawaii, or whatever. So I think a lot of it has to do with that, because at least in the West, Buddhism was presented like as something not religious, I mean, it's very obvious if you go to any temple that it's religious, because there's monks there, obviously it's a religious thing, right? But since that happens, people feel like they have permission to kind of do whatever they want with Buddhism. And there's where I have to sometimes kind of tell them, like, if that works for you, that's fine. And like, you're welcome to do that. But don't trick yourself into thinking that you're doing Buddhism. You're like picking something from Buddhism that helps you, and that's fine. But you're not doing Buddhism. Like sometimes I'll study other religions or things from science, and I find like, oh, that's very useful and insightful. But I don't say then I'm a Buddhist Christian or a Buddhist like something else, because I'm not actually authentically practicing what they're saying, right? I just took something that's useful, and that's fine for me. So sometimes it's just about helping people kind of like see that in themselves, So I'm not against people taking whatever works for them. That's fine, but you have to be very honest about what you're doing, and not say like, oh, this is my Buddhist practice. This is very Buddhist, and this is in line with Buddhism. It's like, not really. It's in line with what you like. You're doing what you like. So most of the time, it's just trying to help people see that they're just doing what they want to do. And I'm an expert in that, because I always try to do what I want to do. I always try to do what I like. So I know how that feels, and so that's usually the thing. But there's like bigger topics, kind of like this kind of, you can be a Buddhist and have like not buy into any of the metaphysical things. I think that's one that I don't try to correct people, but I say like, if you read the text itself, it's telling you what you're saying is not right, Because what does it mean to be a Buddha? A Buddha is someone who's free from samsara. Samsara is not a secular thing. It's like a metaphysical thing. A Buddha is someone Sammasambuddha is someone who's seen all their previous past lives. That's one of the knowledges. That cannot be proven in a secular way, right? Modern scientific way. The other one is seeing beings passing away and re-arising to their karma. That is also not empirical. We can't prove that. And the other one is the knowledge of the influxes, the asavas. I don't know how we can measure asavas. There's no way to do that. So if you say we're taking those things out, you're having Buddhism without a Buddha. Like, that's what it means to be a Buddha. So if you take that away, there's no Buddha. There's just like meditation, there's like good precepts, right? There's like some nice philosophy, but there isn't a Buddha. And if there isn't a Buddha, there can't be Buddhism, right? So it's fine if you want to do that. Like, I'm not telling people not to do it, but you have to be honest with yourself about what you're doing, and don't try to pass it off as Buddhist, because and it also works to the detriment of like traditional Asian Buddhists, because then it's kind of seen like, well, I'm just taking the real parts of Buddhism that really work, and what the traditional Asian Buddhists are doing is like not important, right? So you're kind of like, it's to the detriment of other people. And it's usually kind of presented that way, right? Like, all you really need to do is this because the other thing's not important. So that means what these people are doing, the temples, their culture, the rituals, you're saying all of that's not important, right? Like, so what are you doing there? You know, it's kind of a very kind of like a culturally biased position that you're taking there. So I'm all for people taking from whatever need, like to help them with their suffering, but just be honest about what you're doing. So that's kind of like the stuff that I see myself doing. And sometimes people just like, they'll send me an email, they don't answer back anymore because they didn't get the answer that they wanted. They wanted me to say like, yes, you can be, Buddhism is just a philosophy, it's just a way of life, it's completely secular. I could tell you that, but I'd be lying because there's like gods and demons in the suttas, there's all this magical stuff happening. If I tell you that, I'm just doing it because I want you to like me. And once again, I'm doing it, I mean, selfish reason, right? Because I want you to like me. So we're always kind of, we have to be careful with this self-pleasing, self-aggrandizing, right? This, this whole thing of me, myself, and I is always there. So that's probably the kind of like the core of where all the kind of like my teachings come from on trying to help people navigate Buddhism.
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving that speech and sharing your stories.
Yes.
Do you walk around the temple in Honolulu?
I did it today.
Oh.
Yeah.
I used to walk there too.
Ah, yes.
My question is, when you sit down to meditate, what is the right intention to try to like, as you're driving to the temple to sit down and meditate, what kind of way should you be trying to shape your mind and get that right intention so that you make the max benefit?
Yeah. I can tell you what you shouldn't do.
Okay.
Because I see a lot of people do this one. They rush. People are rushing. So when they come in the door, they're like, oh, and they sit down and they're breathing fast and they're like, oh, Bhante, I'm sorry that I was late. And like, well, you defeated the whole purpose of even showing up now, right? If you're late, you're late. That's okay. It's okay to be late. People are late all the time. And when you rush in, you make all this noise, you disturb other people. You can't sit well because you're thinking, oh, Bhante thinks that I'm late. I'm not a good person. Like, you're sabotaging your practice. So one thing that you shouldn't do is don't sabotage your practice before you get there. Right? While you're driving there, don't worry if you get there late. Don't think about if it's a good meditation or a bad meditation. Just kind of focus on your intention of, it's like a very compassionate intention that you have there, right? To kind of help yourself through this process and help yourself purify your mind. And by you becoming a better person and practicing more Dhamma, it also, the people around you get benefits because you become less of a jerk and you become easier to deal with. So think about that compassionate aspect of the practice instead of like the, I need to do something, or I need to be there, or I need to, this kind of doing kind of thing. Get away and more to like the wholesomeness of it. Like, oh, I'm doing this for my own spiritual care and for the spiritual care. It's such a nice thing. If I show up late, that's fine. It's LA, it's traffic. Everyone's going to be late, you know, like, and things like that. So just before you get there, already start practicing meditation, right? Be mindful of what's in your mind when you're driving there. So sometimes it helps if you already put like a Dhamma talk while you're driving, or like listen to chanting while you're going there. Some of those things will help you to keep that in mind, to have already the Dhamma mind when you get there, instead of like whatever other things. Because sometimes like a lot of people also are like, they're very busy. So on their way to the temple, they're thinking, well, after meditation, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do this, their mind's so clouded. So when they sit down, they're thinking about like their shopping list and that they have to go out with their friends tonight and meet them up for dinner, and like, it's very hard. So just try to avoid those things. I think if you just avoid those things, you'll be pretty good when you sit down for meditation.
I think in one of the suttas, the Buddha, before he gives a talk, he says, put away greed and covetousness.
Yes, yeah.
So I think that's like, I don't know if the point of meditation is to be mindful of your breath or to try to be in the present moment. Is the breath the anchor to get to the present moment?
So being mindful is the first step, right? It's not until we're aware that we can become aware of the problems. So awareness brings to light all the problems, like all the defilements and all of these other things and all our skillful patterns. So once we become aware of what we're doing, we're able to use discernment, which is called Dhamma vichaya. We're able to have this discernment of whether something is kusala wa kusala in our mind. And if it's akusala, unwholesome, we're like, this needs to be removed. That's called pahana, eliminating. And if it's something skillful, then we practice bhavana, which means to cultivate it, right? So we're always watching what comes up, skillful or unskillful. If it's skillful, let's stay here. Let's develop the skillful quality. If it is unskillful, we remove it. How do we remove it? One way is by developing skillful qualities, right? So if you have anger, you develop loving kindness. If you have greedy thoughts, you develop thoughts of renunciation and letting go. So actually, in the beginning, yes, it's very much like today where it's just mindfulness. But once you develop mindfulness and you can use it as a skill, you use it to be able to see what is wholesome and unwholesome. And once you can distinguish between what's wholesome and unwholesome, that means wisdom, you have some wisdom, then you cultivate the wholesomeness, right? And then you keep cultivating wholesomeness, and then little by little, you'll start developing all the qualities of the Noble Eightfold Path. So it's really just about developing the wholesome. That's why meditation is called like bhavana, right? Like watering your garden and taking care of the plants. And then eventually one day they just give fruits. And we even use the word fruit, pala, right? The results, pala means fruit, so, and singhala too.
Bhante, is it possible during meditation for someone to be aware of the different skandhas? Like, for example, you feel a pain here, you notice a feeling, it's painful, then you start thinking, oh, I felt like that yesterday. Is it noticed to, or is it possible to like see that development or that kind of like chain, that sequence?
Yes. So one of the things that happens in meditation is that when the mind becomes very calm and you have some understanding, is that you're able to see all these impersonal processes like the panchakanda. You can see paticca-samuppada. I mean, that's the whole point of practicing meditation, is to see paticca-samuppada. So you can see, right, from contact comes feeling, from feeling comes craving, from craving comes clinging, from clinging comes being, from being comes birth. You get to see it, and then all the suffering that comes from all of it. So yes, it is something to be personally experienced by the wise, right, as we do in the Dhamma Vandana when we chant. So yes, it is possible. You can see for yourself this process of perception. Yeah.
And would you say that it's the hindrances, or is it something else that is not letting you notice that sequence?
Yes, it's, the nivaranas, the pancha nivaranas, they cloud the mind. So the Buddha talks about that some of them are like boiling water, you can't see. Some of them is like tainted water. Some of it's like windy water. So they obscure the mind. If the mind's obscure, you can't see the panchakanda, you can't see the paticca-samuppada, because the mind is clouded. So that's why when you put those aside and you get into the state of samadhi, the mind is clear. When the mind is clear, you can see. That's called vipassana, seeing clearly, or that special kind of seeing. And from that seeing, you're able to see how things arise and cease. And then you get dispassionate. You're like, oh, it's just phenomena that come up and go. There's no me, myself, I, nothing there. And from dispassion comes letting go, right? Because you no longer care about it, so you let it go. And from letting go comes the wisdom and freedom.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you, Venerable Sir. And it is wonderful Dhamma talk and discussion about Dhamma. You always like to discuss more and more about it. He doesn't like to talk that much, but he likes to listen to other people and give the answer. So, Venerable Sir, thank you so much. And we have a little time to chant right now. We go to chant the page 4 and page 10. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato Bhagavato Samma Sambuddhassa Buddham Saranam Gacchami Dhammam Saranam Gacchami Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Actions are inexhaustible. I vow to thin them all. Dhamma gates are limitless. I vow to study them all. Buddha's way is supreme. I vow to attain it. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shadow of grief and the sick find health to live. Thank you for everybody. I think we have tea and cookies. I think somebody make something else today, not the tea. Something herbal things. Herbal we call is kanji, like type of soup. The gentleman and this lady they make this one today, so you can taste it. It's a herbal drinks. Thank you again, Venerable Sanat Vihari, being with us, and we wish you good health for you to continue your Dhamma works. Thanks for everybody. By the power of the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, you all be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And I forget to introduce somebody else here. One of the monks here, I think most of the people know about him. He used to live here a long time ago. He was here 2000 to 2006. He was here in our center. After that, he made his own temple. He's in Anaheim right now. His name is Venerable Sumana, Abbot of the Anaheim Sri Ratana Buddhist Center. So sometimes we can visit there also. They are a very nice big place. They have big service sometime. We all can visit sometime there. So Venerable Sumana was with me last time. We went to Sri Lanka together and he came with me also. So I just want to introduce. thank you again, and hope to see you next Sunday again.